All right. Well, we're gonna start by thanking everybody who's here for coming, and by reprimanding those who are not here because you're not here, so you're not even gonna know that I'm reprimanding you. All right. Okay. So last week we we got to let's see, did we actually start Vav? No, we did not. We didn't finish Hay. We did not finish Hay. Okay,
I
so
do remember we did Ulam gave the poll. I think we did that. That's Vav. We did. Did we start Vav? Maybe we still. Oh,
But even so,
He says it back here. Ulam, sorry.
there's lots of Ulams.
Ulam, lots of
Yeah,
Ulams.
Ulam is going to be every paragraph or two is
Okay,
going to be
I'm
Ulam.
what does that word mean?
Ulam means however or indeed.
Okay. Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
Ulam.
Lots of similar words
Right.
here used often. No, which is, honestly, it's his style. He tries to not use extensive vocabulary. You'll notice throughout his farm, he tries to kind of stick to the same couple hundred words without getting fancy. He very rarely does he speak poetically. You know, he kind of tries to keep it in as simple terms as possible, as clear terms as possible. So
He's no rough cook.
right.
A rough cook is a poet. He read some of his works. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, he was the poet.
Quite a flowery writer.
All right, so, last week, let's start again from what we did last week, which is the end of Daled, where he said V'ulam at the end of Daled. Let's just read through this again so we get our bearings. Everybody see that? Anybody see that?
80.
Page 80. Okay, so V'ulam. However, tzar sheteda, you have to know, ki gam ha'adam atzma, even man himself, in kol ma'asav b'chiriyim. Not all of his actions and his deeds are free choice. Aval yesh mehem sheyu mitzad b'chirasai. Some of them will be his own choice and the products of his choosing. V'yesh acherim sheyisayiv lahem mitzad gezerah al yayna. And there will be other actions that a person will do that will come to him because of a divine decree, either for his benefit or for his punishment. As we will explain later on with Hashem's help. So he's just introducing us to that idea that there are things that are done that are not products of a person's free choice, but they are Hashem's doing in order to make certain things happen. V'ulam, however, once you've done whatever this action is that you've been, I'm not going to say coerced, but you've kind of been maneuvered into doing, at that point, once it's done, it's going to act like everything else in the world acts. Because once the kaiches up on high do whatever they need to do, their manifestation will come down here below. Based on the way things are moved through these kaiches. And from that which is his own choice, that movement will go from bottom up because, as we said, the things that we choose can affect the kaiches as well. So that was the idea that we really covered, that certain things we choose, certain things we don't choose, but whatever it is that we do, those reactions are going to remain. Meaning to say, if something that was kind of imposed on us, that's something that starts on high and comes down to us from on high. And if it's something that we've chosen, then it's the opposite. It starts down here and moves its way up to affect the kaiches up on high. Brad is not listening while standing online. You know, maybe we should turn the speaker the other direction. They should hear us instead of us hearing their music. Okay. So let's continue now. Vihine, unless someone has a question. Okay. So something we choose to do is simple. We understand that. Those are things that we choose. But sometimes there are things that kind of just happen that we don't really choose. Let's say you're walking and you trip. It might not have been a choice. It might not have been a neglect on your part. It may have been something that Hashem made happen. So, the fact that you didn't pay attention and your foot happened to hit right where there was a crack in the sidewalk is not a choice that you made, but it's something that Hashem made it happen.
For a variety of reasons.
For example, I'm walking. I chose to be texting. I chose to.
Right, that would be your choice.
So if I
But sometimes it's not.
based on because I'm not paying attention.
You're right. Sometimes that's what it is, but sometimes it's not that. Sometimes it's actually not your choice. It's something that Hashem made happen. Or let's say a person is walking down the street and they look to the side and they notice something, they take a step, and as they take that step, something whizzes by them that just missed them. Was that their choice? Not really. It's something that just kind of came to them that they did, not necessarily by choice, and that made it happen. Now, how many times do we happen to find ourselves right in the right place at the right time? It's not a choice that we make, it's that Hashem maneuvering and manipulating events to make it happen so that it should be whatever it needs to be. Sometimes, for example, we find the concept of Megalgal and Zechusai de Zakai, that Hashem gives those who are worthy opportunities to do good things. So, if you're a good person and you're constantly involving yourself in mitzvahs and you're looking for mitzvahs, you'll find that you have more opportunities for mitzvahs than somebody who's not. It's not necessarily by your choice, it's that Hashem manipulates and maneuvers things to make that happen for you. Make sense? You think so, maybe? Was that a double negative?
Brad might have an example.
Brad might, but he's not here, so.
I'm not saying it.
Doc, are you with us here?
We're in Savannah, right?
Yeah, are you having trouble with this?
No, this is good.
This is good.
This is exciting.
All right, if Dr. Kraker says it's good,
It's not just good, it's exciting.
it's exciting. Wow. All right, good. We moving on? Anybody?
Please, by all
Yeah?
means.
All right, moving on. Okay, hey. V'hine. Sider ha'adam baruch hu. Hashem arranged. Shekol ha'inyanim asher tipo behem bechiras shel adam. That all the different things that the choice of a man is going to be applicable, or will be a product of the choice of a person, yagiu lahania betnua habechiris as a koichesahem. Thank you. So the things that we choose, they will affect. Hold on. Are we still working on this? Include me. I don't like being left out of the conversation. Come on. This is why I'm getting paid the big bucks.
I was saying, like, you were saying, like, if someone's listening to me, but, like, for example, I chose to join a SolarWorks. They didn't come over to me with the application, say, oh, fill this out.
Correct.
I went to them, and
So that was your choice.
That was your free will, though. That's what
I would venture to say, even though he doesn't say this, I would venture to say that 99% of the things that we do are products of free choice. But there's that 1% of things that just happen.
I was just trying to say that it has nothing to do. You could think you did something all you want. It doesn't mean it's true. In other words, you chose to be texting. That was his example. That's not necessarily true because Baruch Hu wanted you to be texting, you would make it that you'd be texting. You could think that you're the one who chose to do that, but really Hashem put that whole thought process in your mind in the first place.
That's also possible.
So it's not.
It could be your choice. It could be it's not.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Yes, you could. It's hit or miss.
Let me give you an easier to understand example. A friend of mine in Chicago, Friam Wolf. Remember Friam Wolf? Okay. So there was one Friday night in Chicago that I'm sure Brad remembers, that there was a crazy guy who went around to different shuls. He drove by and was shooting people as they were coming out of shul. Remember that? Okay. So this friend of mine, Ephraim Wolf, has a bullet in him. It was lodged in a place that's not removable. Now, the fact that he was facing exactly the direction that he was facing, and in mid-step exactly the way it was, that bullet ended up exactly where it ended up, and he's okay, was not his choice. he didn't choose to be standing at this angle or to make this movement. Yes, it is part of his process of walking, and yes, in some way you could say that was his choice, but in the bigger picture, what really happened was Hashem had that movement going exactly at the right time in the right place, so that this bullet would end up somewhere where it wouldn't be fatal to him. Was that his choice to walk right then, right there in that angle at that time? Technically it was his choice, but that wasn't really his choice. That was just Hashem manipulating and maneuvering, making sure things are the way they need to be in order for his world to continue the way it needed to continue. And remember, this also plays into the bechira of the shooter. Because remember, like we said, the shooter had free choice to shoot. Now, the product of what happens, the result of his shooting, that's not up to him. So he tried shooting someone and killing them. His being unsuccessful was not his choice. Now, could you say, like someone wanted to say last week, well, if he would have shot a better shot, it wouldn't have happened that way? No, because Hashem had it working like this, that regardless of what your choice was as the shooter, the result was not going to be what you wanted it to be. So you couldn't have changed that, if that's the case. So I'm just saying, just to understand, there are things that we understand clearly are our choice, but there are other things that we might, if we think about it, recognize that they're not really our choice. Technically, yes, he did choose to walk there then, but it wasn't really his choice that everything should be exactly the way it was. Is that any better? I think so. Oh, not I think so, maybe. Oh, okay, all right, this is progress.
Is this related to the experience all of us have where we're striving to do a certain thing, like a business deal or
sleep?
No, not sleep. No, something is like some behavior where you have in your mind, I have this goal, and it's very obvious at some point later on that when it didn't go through, it was rejected, or no, it just didn't happen. I mean, it just always seems very obvious that another influence was in there because it was saying, no, this isn't the path you're supposed to be on. Is that similar to this idea of a decree? Okay.
Yeah. Okay, are we good? All right, moving on. Wait, are we ready to move on? Okay. I think so, maybe?
I don't know what Yochanan
My
said.
choice. This is not his choice.
All right. Moving on. Vehine. Hey. Vehine. Sider ha'adam baruch hu Hashem arranged shekol inyanim asher atilu lehem b'chirat shel adam. That everything that falls into the category of a person's choosing, yagiu lahania betnuah ha'bechiris as a koiches. The result of that choice that a person makes is going to have the ability to affect the koiches on high. To the extent and to the level that Hashem decreed for that particular choice and that particular kayach. Behind it, when this is, you have to realize it's not just a person's actions that will make these things change and move. Even a person's speech and even a person's thoughts. Those things also affect the koiches up there, and everything that goes on in this world is affected by the choices that we make. And those choices aren't just the choices of the physical things we choose to do or not do, but it's also the things we choose to say or not say, and the things we choose to think or not think.
Whoa.
There's some parakeets swirling down.
I know, I'm ignoring them. However, Shir HaTanua, the measure of the movement, Madregasa, and the level, Lo Yiyu Ela Ba'aise Hagvul Shagazra. It's only going to be within the boundaries that Hashem decreed, V'Higbila HaChachma Alyana, and the way Hashem set it up that it should work. So, what he's saying here is that we have to realize it's not just our actions that have the ability to affect the upper koiches and then come back down to affect the world around us, but our speech and our thought also. Now, we have to mention over here the words of Nefesh HaChaim. Nefesh HaChaim, Chaim Volozhiner, has a lengthy discussion about how the more physical something is, the more related it is to this world. The more spiritual something is, the more related it is to the upper world. So therefore, he says, the things that we do are going to have the least effect on the upper worlds. The things that we think are going to have the most effect, the greatest effect on the upper worlds, because thought itself is more of a spiritual process than action is. And speech is right in between. Speech is something which is physical, but it's also very high, a product of a very high intelligence, which is the neshama. So in order to have the effect relative to the action or the speech or the thought, we have to understand where it comes from. So thought, which is purely the product of intelligence, which is a product of the neshama, is going to be the most spiritual things that we can do. And therefore its effect on high is going to be the most effective in the spiritual worlds. Action, which is the most physical thing we can do, is going to be the most removed from the spiritual world, and therefore will have the least effect. So therefore, when he says over here that it's not just our actions that affect the upper world, but it's our thoughts and our speech as well, it's actually the more powerful things that affect the upper worlds are our speech and our thought. Those are the most effective things. And what do you, he's in?
So it's like, the thought, this is
Right.
Shachayim, but
Get his
there's
number.
also other things. If I learned it correctly from many years ago, and I'm currently trying to still institute this and inculcate this into my life. The thoughts are neshama. The thoughts are the highest levels, can have the highest impact on the spiritual realm. The ruach, which is equivalent to the ruach, is the wind, it's our mouth, it's what we communicate. And the nefesh, which is our actions, is in our blood, is in our body, that's the lowest level. Our behaviors, we exhibit, of course, affect this world and some of the spiritual world. But what we speak affects higher worlds, and what we think, it can ripple into some of the highest realms, which is neshama.
Right.
So it's your actions are your nefesh, your speech is your ruach, and your thoughts are neshama. I mean, and he can go on further, but this is the basics of what
Yep.
nefesh time is trying to say.
Yeah.
That's what we should learn next.
Next.
Yeah.
Yes.
So in the mind, the thought can sometimes be called the self-talk thought,
Okay.
but there's also the imagination of images and pictures in your mind.
Okay.
And for many people, depending upon their personalities or their type of work, whatever, those two are very, very different.
Okay.
Does that get defined any differently from what you're saying? Imagination then is lumped into the idea of the spiritual because it's this cognitive thing. What?
Yeah.
Yes, the idea of imagination is actually one of the wordings that's used to describe thought.
And it's also like a very big tool in
Everything.
and creating and building personality.
So is imagination considered higher than the self-talking thoughts that you have?
That's an interesting question.
I don't know. I haven't seen any distinction in there.
But certainly we could say not to kind of lift people up and not be so depressed that we all have
Depressed?
very,
Wait a minute.
very concerning
Who's
thoughts.
depressed?
At least I have.
Lynn?
very disturbing
Is that you?
thoughts.
Stop it.
Depressed?
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
Right.
suffer from
So-
eternal happiness.
Perfect. So who's depressed?
Right. But the actions, certainly you could have a thought that, and I'm sure everybody at this table has had thoughts that they thought about that are just not something that they really want to do, but they've had these thoughts, and because they don't do that, even though that affects on the neshama level, that thought, your behavior, it could be your ruach and your nefesh, your behavior and your speech is not going to carry that out. Whatever that thought may be. It could be looking at something, it could be doing this, it could be a thought of aggression. If we want to get real and be human, we all probably had these thoughts at one time or another, right? And that's on a level, a thought is on the level of, it affects the highest.
Yes.
And so, but it could be deflating if you continuously put your life through that lens, then you're going to just feel like,
Yeah.
what's the point? Because
Okay.
it's very important
I don't know if what you just did made things better or worse.
I know I'm saying you should recognize that you can, just because you have a thought, it doesn't define who you are.
Ah,
You're
okay.
not defined by your
Okay.
thoughts. You're ultimately down here, at this point, defined by what you do. Right? Your actions. Same thing with mitzvahs. Thinking I'm going to do a mitzvah, I mean, that's a very good thing, but doing the mitzvah certainly is going to have more of an impact on me to connect to Hashem. Hashem may give me credit for thinking of doing the mitzvah, but if I don't do the mitzvah, it's not helping me. And the mitzvahs are not only for mitzvahs. Hashem doesn't need anything from us. The mitzvahs aren't they truly for us? And a deep, but I mean, I guess you're doing it with the mitzvahs too. So there are things. Okay, I don't want to do it. I'm gonna reel it back in.
All right, what else?
Well, I can continue with that now. No, so one thing that is confusing to me is that in sleep medicine, when you're helping...
Here we go again. Everybody pay attention.
When you're helping a person who can't go to sleep at night, they have what's called racing thoughts, ruminations, worries, and so forth.
Yeah.
And it turns out that a very large proportion of people who have that problem, those thoughts are actually driven, for the most part, by unprocessed emotion. In other words, things that have gone on during the day, they just haven't been able to finish working through.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of thought doesn't sound very spiritual to me. It sounds very, it's actually considered a substitute. The person is using the racing thoughts because in a certain way, they may not even want to go to sleep for other reasons, and so their mind races. But another side to it is just that they have unfinished business, and so it just goes on in their head with all this, chatter.
Mm-hmm.
And most people who have it, even though if they would spend time looking at it, they'd say, oh, this is useful information, I can use this to start processing better. Most people don't even look at it that way. They just think, well, my mind's chattering, and so I'm having trouble digesting why that would be thought of as spiritual. Doesn't seem to fit.
It might be the lowest level, but it's still a product of high intelligence. And the high intelligence comes from the neshama.
Okay.
Now, part of that high intelligence is necessary for day-to-day living, and that's what you're referring to. But that's still it's still a product of the neshama.
Okay.
Okay. All right, what else?
Something that we have the, I would think, the least control over, that it makes the most impact.
Say again?
You're saying something you have the least amount of control over, which is your thoughts, has the most impact on
Something that you have the least control over. Why do you think you have the least amount of control over your thoughts?
Because people, in order to do an action, you have to have the thoughts and you have to convince yourself, whatever it is, whether it's to eat the pizza or to drink, to move the chair.
Okay, let me bring you into the
thought.
One
to
second.
Move the chair. You
One
can't
second.
have a thought.
Let me bring you into the world of an addict for a moment.
Yeah.
The addict tells themselves, I shouldn't smoke, and they pick up the cigarette and smoke it anyway.
Okay.
Where's their thought?
No, but he may be talking more about intrusive thoughts, or thoughts where,
I'm not talking about intrusive thoughts.
well, those are still thoughts.
There are impetuous actions too,
There are impetuous
and
actions.
there's impetuous thoughts. Yes, these things happen. But I don't know that I don't think there's a given that thoughts are the least controllable part.
Person has, I don't know what number, but I never thought about this before, or I never studied it, but I would imagine, I would venture to say, that a person has many more thoughts than actions.
Does a person have many more thoughts than actions?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like
Let's say-
breathing.
My eyes are everything that, I'm taking everything in.
Well, the processing, okay, yeah, correct. That's all.
I don't know what it is, but I see everything.
That's all processing. Yes.
It's all processing.
Okay.
Those are all thoughts.
Okay.
But yet I've done nothing but relax. In other words, I'm listening. But I'm saying
Good to hear.
action-wise, and now that I'm talking is a shadow of but
It's in
saying here
between.
not an action.
It's in between. It's a
Saying
separate
in between,
category.
but like,
Yeah.
Okay, so besides from my hand movements and whatnot with my feet, I haven't done many actions.
Correct.
So
therefore what?
But I don't have control, I would think, I have an easier, I have decided not to move because,
Well, 1 second. You've decided not to move because that's the easier choice.
Okay,
Okay.
but
Now,
I can't decide
not to think about something?
I can't.
Okay.
Yeah,
So I will invite you to open up Strive for Truth. And in Strive for Truth, Dessler, in his second section, has an entire section dedicated to how thought is a product of will. You don't think about things that you don't have an interest in.
I don't know. I would disagree with that.
Those are the words. Those are the words that he says.
I would say there are people that have intrusive thoughts and do not want to think about it. It's
Okay,
obsessive.
but-
It's obsessive, which
And they
means
can't
that in a deeper place,
That
they
they
do
really
want to
want
think
it.
about it,
Right.
but their
I'm not gonna argue
their
on
conscience
that.
doesn't want to think about it. So they're battling within themselves to think about it or not to think
No,
about it.
it's not, at this point, it's not even a battle. Well, I guess you could call it a
I
battle.
totally
Okay,
agree
but
with
but
that.
I would like you to read that.
I totally
Take your
grapple with that.
go ahead, read through it. Tell me what you think about it when you're done. But the idea is that the fact that a person has intrusive thoughts, those things are typically products of something, and they can be gotten rid of, sometimes more easily than others. Let's say a gag reflex. Everybody has a gag reflex, except people who train themselves not to have a gag reflex, right? The sword swallowers train themselves to not have a gag reflex, to reel in that reflex so that their body doesn't react that way, right? Because otherwise they'd kill themselves, right? So the reflex is something which is an action that we have very little choice over, and yet you can master it, right? So what I'm saying is that the same thing is true of thoughts. Maybe harder, maybe easier, everything is going to be different. But the bottom line is that we are generally in control of our thoughts as we are in control of our actions. Some things we just decide not to try to control. And it may be easier. I'm not saying it's not necessarily. I'm just saying I would need to have something that would show me that one is easier than the other. But even let's say it is. Let's say thoughts are harder.